But as we're going through this story today, I want you to make this your own prayer. May my eyes be opened. May my eyes be opened to what? This maybe you might be asking yourself. And we're going to go through this passage rather quick because I'm assuming that you know this story. But if not, it's pretty easy to follow along. It's in 2 Kings. 2 Kings, it's the Old Testament. And you can access that either in your own Bible or the Bible that is in front of your pew, or if somebody took that pew at the Bible and you have a phone, you can log into our Wi-Fi and open your Bible in your phone. So 2 Kings chapter 6, and we're going to be reading from verse 8 on. I'm assuming that I gave you enough time to open your Bibles, but if not, make your way through. If you cannot find 2 Kings, in the front of the Bible there is an index where you find the different books, and you can find it there. Now, if I hear somebody saying, "Hey Siri, open 2 Kings," that will be okay too. And so 2 Kings chapter 6 verse 8 says this. Now, the king of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he said, "I will set up my camp in such and such place." The man of God sent a word to the king of Israel, "Beware of the passing that place, because the Arameans are going down there." So the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by the man of God. Time and time again, Elisha warned the king, so that he was on his guard in such places. This enraged the king of Aram, and he summoned his officers and demanded to them, "Will you not tell me which of us is on the side of the king of Israel?" "None of us, my lord the king," said one of his officers. "But Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom." "Go, find out where he is," the king ordered, "so I can send men and capture him." The report came back, "He is in Dothan." Then he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there, and they went by night and surrounded the city. Now, time out here for a second. Time out here. Does it make any sense to you? Does this make any sense to you? Well, there are many things that might capture your attention. One can be they can send this whole army for one guy. The other thing might have captured your attention is like, how in the world did Elisha know what was happening in the Arameans' camp? The other thing that can capture your attention. The other thing that can capture your attention is, excuse me, Mr. King, if you are that smart, and if the Lord told everything that was going to happen to Elisha, where are you going to be at? Will he not tell him about you coming after him? I mean, right? It's like a little bit of a common sense. But apparently, sometimes our own ego blinds our own senses. Been there, done that? Your ego has blinded you, and you made decisions on the rush that made no sense, but it would totally make so much sense to you that nobody can deny what you were doing. But he sends his army at night, thinking that maybe nobody will see it and will be a total surprise to who? To the men of God. And when you talk about the men of God, you know that God is behind that person. That's what the Arameans are assuming, and ergo, he's trying to surprise God. Verse 15, when the servant of the man of God got up and went out early next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. "Oh, my lord, what shall we do?" the servant asked. "Don't be afraid," the prophet answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And Elisha prayed, "O Lord, open his eyes so he may see." Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. As the enemy came down towards him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, "Strike those people with blindness." So he struck them with blindness, and as Elisha had asked. And Elisha told them, "This is not the road, and this is not the city. Follow me, and I will lead you to the man you are looking for." And he led them to Samaria. They were in Dothan. They led them to Samaria. After they entered the city, Elisha said, "Lord, open their eyes of these men so they can see." Then the Lord opened their eyes, and they looked, and there they were, inside Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elisha, "Shall we kill them, my father? Shall we kill them?" "Do not kill them," he answered. "Would you kill men you have captured with your own sword or bow? Set food and water before the men, so they may eat and drink, and then go back to their master." So he prepared a great feast for them, and they had finished eating and drinking, and he sent them away, and they returned to their master. So the bands of Aram stopped raiding Israel territory. Now, this is a story in the Old Testament that you'll love to hear about. Now, many things are happening in this story that I want to acquaint you with in the meantime. So, in the passage before, the king of Aram, the king of Syria, has sent one of his own officers that was having leprosy. He sends them to see Elisha because he have heard many things that God was doing through Elisha. And this main officer in the Aramean army gets healed and goes back. So we don't know how much time passes in between the passage before and this passage, but we see that still when the king of Syria knew about what God was doing, what kind of God was it, so he still is in war with Israel. And the many things that are happening, the city is besieged, and there are many things happening around this passage that we see that Israel is still in a chaotic moment in their life. And if you follow the passage after, even when the Arameans saw what God has done in their life and spared their life, they did not stop pursuing or trying to conquer Israel. They stopped for a little while, but then you see that they still continue. That in verse 21, the subtitle there says famine in besieged Samaria. It means that it stopped for a while, but then it continued. And that made me think about some of the phrases that we normally say about people who do not believe in God. We say, well, it's really hard for them or to me to believe in this situation because I have not seen anything in order to believe. If I could only see, I would be able to believe. I would say yes, but I have not seen it. But can I remind you that it doesn't matter how much you see or do not see. Faith is not sprung by what you see. Because the king of Samaria saw the miracles happening before, through, and after, and still did not change his mind. So can I ask you, where is your heart? How is your heart? Is your heart in a position of asking God to lead you, or you are in a position of questioning God and everything He does? Now, normally we remember this story as a story of Elijah being surrounded and Gehazi, his assistant, being also in that predicament of being surrounded by an army. And in my mind, I'm hearing the song, "This is how I fight my battles." This is how I fight my battles. I will not sing. I will spare the singing to you. Don't worry about it. And many songs has been sung about it, and many times we like to sing that in the middle of our troubles, right? In the middle of our complicated moments. And can I tell you that the issue of our faith is the issue of the faith is not only for the people that do not know God. The issue of our faith is also for the people of God. Because Elisha's assistant has seen God move so many times. And he had been in trouble for his own disobedience because in his own unbelief, he went after money that Elisha said no to. And he lied to the men of God and went after the money and got the money and ended up not only getting the money, but also receiving the leprosy that the Syrian officer had. And he was covered in leprosy. Now, in this passage that we are reading, we don't know if he was still with leprosy or not, but he's still serving the king, serving Elisha. So we don't know if this is in chronological order technically. So that's what I'm just being open to the possibilities. And in this passage, we see that the assistant of Elisha has seen God move before, has seen God doing things. Yet, all of a sudden, he wakes up, goes out to do businesses, and prepare things, and finds himself surrounded with an army, and comes back full of faith and full of Lord, the Lord will do something. No. He comes back to Elisha and says, my Lord, we are surrounded. Right? It doesn't really matter in your journey how far along are you in your journey with Jesus. There are going to be always situations in your journey where it will require you grow in your faith, grow in your trust in Jesus. Okay, so how are you doing trusting God in your journey? What are the challenges that are in your life right now? Now, a couple of years ago, I remember that I went into a conference that I was very looking forward to go. And the pastor who stood in front of the congregation of the whole conference, welcoming everybody, a.k.a. Pastor Tim Keller, if you remember, then you can give him a hard time later. He stood up and said, welcome, everybody. Can I remind you that you are either getting out of a crisis, in the middle of a crisis, or heading into a crisis. And my heart sunk that moment. Went, doo-doo. I was like, oh, great. That was the great opening words I was longing to hear all along. My heart said, Lord, I just got out of a doozy. I don't want to get into a new one. Been there, done that? Have you ever said that to the Lord, ever? And I was like, okay, great. But can I remind you an obvious thing? Can I remind you that reality is not defined by what your eyes see? I play this with my kids sometimes. Can you remind me that? What do you guys... Have you remember playing with your own kids when they were little? I spy in my little eye. In my house, it becomes a reason for explosive reactions. After a while, it becomes a wild game. Because we're looking for something that is happening. Yeah, everything is in my house is big time. It gets like, you don't see it, I see it. You don't see it, I see it. You don't see it. Now, I want to introduce you to another one that maybe if you were a teenager or in the mid-90s or late 2000s, that bring you memories. Which movie are we talking about? The Matrix, right? The Matrix. And so the plot of The Matrix was just simply that our life is not just only what we see with our eyes, but there is more to the reality than what your eyes can see. And this movie starts with a certain music, and this line happening is a code happening, and so it's meant to be a programming issue. Then, so the movie says that our life is just a dream, and this whole program is an illusion, and somebody's messing with your brain. I just realized that when this is happening in our screen, you know what is this? Somebody has a great sense of humor. This is a sushi recipe. You didn't know that. It's a sushi recipe that is happening in the screen. Meantime, you're thinking that is happening in front of you. It's a major event of history. It's just a sushi recipe. And now, every day you are challenged to define what's reality. You're always wondering, what am I facing with? How should I read these? What do I have in front of me? What is real? What is not real? Right? And then those things gets a little bit blurry sometimes, and then depending on your level of caffeine or lack of caffeine in the morning, you start wondering, did I remember this? Did I dream about this? And the lines becomes a little bit blurry sometimes, and then you can confide to your spouse, honey, I'm losing my marbles. What is going on here? If you're not there, lucky you. But, you know, what is real, what is not real? You're always trying to define that. So Elisha's assistant goes and defines reality in one term. Lord, we're doomed. We're done. We you know, the ride was super nice, but this is over. He was reading, this is the end of our story right here. There is no way that we can outrun these people. There is no way that we can unrun this situation, that there is no way that things can be different. Have you ever been in that boat? Of reading reality in front of you and seeing only one outcome. Can I remind you that many times the reality is not what is defining what's next, but your fears are? Your fears are kicking a great deal of suggestions of what the only outcomes to this situation can be. So can I ask you, how often are your fears interfering your life? How many times are you reading reality through the lenses of your fears? Because in the assistance to the prophet's side, it didn't matter how many miracles he saw before. His first reading was, we're done. He didn't see anything else. And Elisha prayed, Lord, open his eyes. And all of a sudden he sees that there are more people on the army of God than those that are against. Right? So what do you, if you press pause in that movie right in that moment, if you will be the assistant, what do you imagine that is going to happen next? Well, we have more people on our side than people against. So the war is going to start. We're going to win because they're much better. We have better numbers. But the war, they never happened. There was no war. Elisha prayed, Lord, hit them with blindness. Well, I didn't see that coming. I was not expecting that. I didn't know. And where are we going from here? Now, if you're watching a movie, two things happen when you are in a movie. You appreciate the twists of the story that you were not imagining. So you appreciate, wow, that was cool. I didn't see that coming. But when it's not a movie and it's in your own life, you said, oh, bummer, I don't like this. Somebody changed the script. We're going through, I didn't see this coming. Uh-oh. Right? It's great, a twist of events in a movie. It's not good in my own life. Don't mess with my brain. Don't mess with me. I don't like this. Been there, done that? Can I say that I'm the only one there? Okay, great. I'm the only one there. Great that you are so good. But you know that the challenge is every day. Who defines what's happening? Because your mood is affected by the way you read reality. Your mood is affected by what you imagine that it will happen next. Right? This is the moment when you have to elbow your spouse. Bing. Come on. How have you been in your mood lately? Well, I don't know. I'm afraid that this is going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where we're going. I don't know what's going to happen with this. Can I remind you that only God can define reality? Now, oh, Pastor, I know that. I knew that. Can you tell me something that I don't know? Well, there is a journey that says that is only 30 centimeters long. Sorry, I grew up in metric systems, so it's kind of more complicated. Let's put it like it's about 10 inches. I'll try to do my best here. 10 inches of distance. That is 10 inches equals an eternity of traveling from your head to your heart. You know it. Yet every day, you live like you don't know it. Because we all make plans and assumptions and define what we're going to do based on what we think that is the best direction to go. Because we define what we're going to do and the outcome events and our own ability to predict what's going to happen. And we don't like when we cannot predict what's going to happen. And our fears kicks in and says, man, I don't like this. If you're playing any sports, right? If you've ever been playing any sports, you know that the most difficult part of the game is to manage your own head. What do you think about when your team is losing? Maybe you're playing baseball. And you're in the last inning. And you are 5 runs under. Are we going to win? Are we going to lose? Right? Now another movie comes to my mind. Angels in the we know that one. How is the title? Angels in the Outfield. Thank you. You know, so how do you change the outcome of things? When I was a teenager, it was, Lord, can I pray that you intervene in the game, or is it unfair? Can I not do this? But you're in your own head, and your thoughts messes with how you engage with reality, because you're imagining that you're going to lose. The reality is that you don't know if you are going to lose the game or not. And you're thinking so much that it's affecting how you perform, how you do things. Right? Imagine if you had a car accident. Right? You're fresh into crashing somebody. And then you sit down back in the car after that crash. How is your level of confidence? Right? You've been driving for 15 years and you had only one accident. And then when you sit down back again in the steering wheel, you feel like, I cannot do this. I have no confidence. What defines reality? Reality is that 90% of the time we ignore God in our equation of how to proceed, what to do. We know that only God can define the full reality, but many times we imagine that God is absent of our reality. We imagine that God only is present in our life in a certain moment of our life and no more. Can I encourage you to welcome God into your daily reality? Lord, can you teach me how do I read this? How should I read this situation? What do you want to do? Where are you at? We fail to recognize God because we cannot see God in the reality. We imagine that He's absent. When we cannot see Him, we imagine that He's not there. We imagine that He forgot about us. We imagine that He has never been there. And we imagine that He's out of control with the events of our life. Can I call you out on that? Can I remind you that it's not true? Can I remind you that in the middle of your worst nightmare of life, God is not absent. God is not ignoring you. God is not taking a nap. God is present. God is with you, even when you cannot see Him. So, can we let God define what reality is? Can we make a space before we jump into conclusions of how things gonna go? And let God define what's the next step. Elisha prayed, Lord, strike me with blindness. And he leads them from Dothan to Samaria. And then that being what? Surrounded by the other army. And the king asked, Lord, should we kill them? Should we kill them? Because we are assuming that if God lead them here, it's because this is the next step. Logically, this is what we have to do. Annihilate all our adversaries. Get rid of them. And again, God does something that we're not anticipating and saying, no, you don't do that. You don't do that. And God shows what? God shows mercy. God shows mercy on the Aramean army. The same Aramean army that later will end up sieging the city and many people will die. Was God fair? Was God unfair? You're always judging how God is. Can I trust God that He knows what He's doing? Can I trust God to help me see reality as it is and lead me to the next step? God is showing mercy to people that didn't show mercy and to people that would not show mercy. But it doesn't mean that God is unfair. It means that God is really merciful and really gracious. That He gives very, very open and many opportunities to turn around. And God is giving us all opportunities to trust in Him. So can I call you out to be aware of your self-pity talk? Because if you let the self-pity run wild in your life, it will consume your thoughts. How does self-pity look like? How does self-pity sounds like? Can I have a help? How self-pity sound like? Oh, me. Always the same story. This is unfair. It should not happen to me. I am the victim. Always happens to me, not to anybody else but me. What else? I will never get out of here. I'm doomed. Too much for me to take. There is no way out. What else? Now, if you are saying something, I'm not assuming that you live there, okay? Can I give you freedom to that? The reality is that we are all experts in self-pity. What else? Makes you doubt. Doubt about what? It makes you doubt. Doubt what? Does God really care? Does God see me? Does God will do anything? Is God's timing really perfect? Or He will be late. Right? If you let it, it runs wild as wild weeds, weeds everywhere, and they will consume the lawn of your life, or the lawn of your heart, and the lawn of your mind. Can you call the earliest you are able to realize that you're going into self-pity, the earliest you will be able to get out of there? Because the more you let the weeds of self-pity grow in your life, the more complicated it is to get rid of them. But there is hope. There is hope to get out of there. So can you give God a room in your life and don't assume the next steps? Don't assume what's going to happen. Don't assume that it's going to be in doom. I remember Jesus responding to the people around him about the blindness of a guy. He says, Lord, who sinned, him or his parents, to end up blind? The Lord said, neither. This is an opportunity for the glory of God to be revealed. Could not be the same thing for you. In the middle of the issue that you're going through, it could be an opportunity for God to shine through and reveal himself. Now, I'm not assuming that God will do whatever I think that you're going to do, or that my hopes and my faith is, I have more faith if God does what I think he's going to do, and if it doesn't happen, I can have less faith. Can we call that as not a godly thing? My faith is in Jesus. In the things he wants to do, either I understand them or not understand them. I'm not playing arm wrestling with God to make him do whatever I want him to do. But the reality is that we fail to recognize God's hand and God's presence in the difficult moments of our life. We fail to recognize that either God is in it right now, or we fail to recognize that God was present in the issues before. And you might be stuck with issues in your life that you label bad all the time because you think that God forgot about you. So I want to welcome you to remember that the Lord is always leading us to trust him, even when we continue stumbling over and over. And I want to close today with an exercise, and I want to leave it there. Many times there are painful events in our lives, either present or past events, that we are stuck with. And we doubt about God's goodness all the time. Last 2 Thursdays ago, we were in a gathering here, and we were talking about how good was in this past month. And there was a testimony of a friend of this person who was struggling with an event of her life. And she was so upset that he went to the Lord and asked the Lord, Lord, where were you when we had this car accident? Assuming that God was never to be found. And all the time while they're praying, the Lord showed her where Jesus was at in the middle of the accident. You know what image she had? It was the image of Jesus sitting right behind her, holding her. Meantime, the accident was happening. Can I let you know that image all that event got relabeled as a good one, not as a bad one? So I'm going to invite you to do a simple exercise. And this is an exercise that we trust Jesus where to go, okay? And it's not an exercise that we determine where to go. But we simply ask the Lord, Lord, is there anything in any event in our life that has been traumatic or has been painful in my life where I assume that you were not there? And we don't tell Jesus which one to go to, but we just wait in his presence until the image comes to your mind. You don't choose which image comes to mind, what moment of your life comes into your mind. You just let him bring one to the surface. And next act, when you have that image in your mind, you just ask the Lord, Lord, where were you there in that painful moment of my life? And you just make a pause and wait. Sometimes the Lord shows you where he was at in that moment right away, and sometimes later on. I know that for many of us, this exercise is kind of weird. Okay, can I say it? For many of us, this exercise feels like weird because we do not know if that is real or not. Am I imagining it? Am I making that up? What we are asking with that exercise is to be able to see through Jesus' lenses what our physical eyes cannot see. And we are asking the Lord to show us where he was in moments when we could not see him. But it's needed for us to see where was Jesus, because we are assuming that he was absent. And the reality is that there is no event in your life that you have ever gone through, no matter how painful it was, where he was not there. And can you let Jesus speak to your life through that event and what he wants to tell you about that event? Okay? So I'm going to take 5 minutes and go through that together. And can I encourage you that would not make that event the only moment, these only 5 minutes to give Jesus to speak? But may you take time to be with Jesus by yourself this week in prayer and ask the same question.